This has been one of the strangest, but also one of the most exciting paddle reviews I've done in a while. I don't do paddle reviews as much as I used to, as you guys have probably noticed, but whenever something big comes around, I just have to. I can't help it. Now, before we begin, I've got the paddles out here in front of me, as you can see. I get all these paddles for free. I don't do any financial stuff with these reviews, guys. So I don't do their affiliate thing. They don't pay me. It's just, it's all for free. That's basically the way that you want to look at this. So there's no financial strings attached when it comes to my opinion that I'm about to give you. This has been kind of a sneaky one. I'll explain everything. I'm going to go into all the details here. I'm really, really excited, but let me just show you kind of what's going on here. So here they are, looking pretty snazzy. As you can see, it's got some of this tape on here, as you can see here. Typical Gearbox shape, you know, very different than the GBX. So if you guys remember when the GBX came out, it's got that honeycomb, you know, but this is very similar to the CX14. So if you're currently on the CX14 and that's your thing, it's going to be very, very similar to that, especially when it comes to shape and kind of the overall feel. But the paddles come in two varieties. So you have the power version over here, then you have the control version, and then you have two shapes within that. So you've got the fusion and the elongated. You can kind of think of this as the traditional shape, and this is your elongated shape. You can totally think of it that way. That is totally fine. Same thing over here with the control paddles, fusion, elongated, traditional, elongated, whatever. First, let's go into the shapes here. So as you can see, you may be able to see this, we've got a 5.5-inch handle here. What's interesting though is that all of the handles are the same. These are all 5.5-inch long handles for that nice two-handed backhand. Also with the longer handle, you get a little bit more leverage over the sweet spot further up, so you get a little bit more power, a little bit more attack on the ball. But it's interesting though, because they're all 5.5. So this has been a trend for a while now. This whole long handle thing, you're not seeing the short handles anymore. So pretty standard stuff. Circumference is 4 inches around. Okay, that's not a capital G, that is a around thing. 4 inches around. Nice beveled handle. So if you come from tennis or you like to have the bevels on the handle, you can very clearly feel them. Of course, if you don't like handles this thin, you can certainly wrap it. You know, keep in mind though, if you wrap too much, you're going to lose some of that contour, some of those bevels. Weight is an interesting one. Believe it or not, we are looking at 8.0 ounces, which is very different than the CX14 here, which is 8.5. So definitely a little bit different here with the weight. It has dropped down, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's dropped down and with the kind of power that you can get with these paddles. Now, the length is a little bit, it's kind of strange almost. I've got my cheat sheet over here. For the elongated, we're looking at 16.5 inches, but over here it's 16. So the only difference between the fusion and the elongated, or the traditional and the elongated, is that it's a 1/2 inch higher on the head. So everything down here is the same when it comes to the handles. The only difference is that it's a 1/2 inch taller on the head. So you can see the handles start from the same spot. So if we kind of line up here on the bottom, you know, everything is the same down here. It's just extended by a 1/2 inch. That's it. That's the only difference. I don't think there's any kind of construction difference between the two, but you can feel it. I mean, a 1/2 inch you're going to feel when it comes to the differences here. So pretty interesting. But in terms of the differences between the power and the control, which is the gold version, the gold color here is the power, white is the control. It's interesting because when I was out recording some other videos and some B-roll footage for this video, there were a group of ladies there, and I gave them the paddles because I was curious what they thought. And they said that the control paddles felt heavier than the power ones. When I told them that all of the paddles weigh the exact same, they were quite surprised, as was I. I thought the same thing. I thought that the control paddles weighed a little bit more, but they don't. Now, I don't know what's going on there. Could be some confirmation bias, I don't know. But they feel a little bit softer than the power versions. Do I get more power playing with the power ones compared to the control ones? Personally, I don't notice much of a difference. However, when I compare these paddles here to my old CX14, and especially the old CX14, so this is the ultimate version here, the difference is pretty much night and day. With the kind of reactivity, the pop and the force that comes off the paddle with these paddles here, I would include the control version in that is noticeable. It's very, very noticeable. So although I don't see too much of a difference between the control and the power versions, and that has been the case for a long time with my paddle reviews, that people try to put out these power or control versions. I've rarely noticed a difference. Let's put it like that. But I can definitely tell a difference between the old Gearbox paddles and these new ones when it comes to power. The overall quality is great, of course. I mean, it's Gearbox, right? The paddles feel amazing in your hand. They feel extremely balanced. There's no surprises here. I'm convinced that if Gearbox made any other kind of product, regardless of what it is, it would just probably be really good. I mean, they just make good stuff. It's high quality stuff. I have never had a quality control issue with their paddles. Doesn't mean they don't exist, right? But personally, I've never had a problem. I have friends who play with Gearbox. They've never had a problem. The texture on the surface stays put. It stays there. Even my CX14 here and the old CX14 still have their texture to this day. Speaking of texture, there's plenty on this paddle. That is for sure. You've got your carbon fiber face as usual, but this one's a little bit different than the old one. So I don't see if you can hear. See, let me do this. You hear that? It sounds like a zipper, right? Whereas, big difference, right? Does it make a huge difference with spin? I'm not noticing a huge difference personally, but that's anecdotal. Maybe a little bit, but nothing too crazy. I mean, remember, mechanics matter way more than any amount of money you can pay for paddles. Always remember that. But it still gets plenty of spin. I mean, you're going to get that just fine. But the textured surface from the CX14 compared to these new ones is very different. This one feels more materialistic. It feels like it's a part of the paddle, whereas these CX14s, it sort of seems like it was like dipped in something. Do you see what I mean? The CX14 feels more like sandpaper, but this feels like it's a part of the face itself. The paddles look great. You've got this edge guard around them here. It's sort of like it's kind of like a tape, but it's a very fancy tape. Just helps to protect the edge here. You can see how I've had a couple of run-ins with the with the court. I'm not slamming my paddle. I sometimes I'll hit the court when I'm running around, and it protects it nicely. There could be another reason why they have the tape on here, but I'm not 100% sure about that. But there was one thing about this paddle though that kind of drove me crazy, and I know that sounds weird. Like I'm sitting here talking about how great these paddles are, but there was one thing that wasn't so great, and that's the noise. The noise is different. I told you the story about how I went out to go record videos and those ladies were there. When I gave them the paddles, one lady in particular said something brilliant. She said, "It sounds like you're playing pickleball underwater." And that is so good. I mean, that's so accurate. And I told her, I said, I'm using that in the video, just so you know. That is really what it sounds like. They are attacking the noise issue. They really are. They're saying, okay, there's noise problems in the pickleball world. There are, and I get it. I totally get it with the noise ordinances and all this sort of stuff. They're saying, let's get started on this. We're gonna try it. We're gonna try this out and see what happens. It sounds muffled. Check it out.
San Diego.
So as you can tell, quite muffled. That is real audio there, right? There's no adjustments made or anything. That's the real deal. That's what it sounds like. And at first, I hated it. I hated it. I went out to go hit with a friend and I was like, dude, this is awful. But as I got used to it, it was okay. It took a while to get used to. The reason why, guys, is I started playing 6 years ago. I started with the Onyx Z5, I think it was called. Nomex core, graphite face, super loud, right? And I'm just used to that. I'm used to really loud paddles. And so this was just different. But it doesn't affect the performance. You know, it's not going to affect your shots. You're just going to have to get used to it. That's all. That's really the only complaint I have. I mean, honestly, like my final verdict here, the paddles are amazing. They're amazing. Mechanics matter first and foremost. Your skill as a player. Don't forget that. I'm not going to let anyone forget that, all right? But yeah, the paddles are good. They're so good. And of course they are. Of course they are. I'm getting like almost bored at this point. I hope that Gearbox puts out just a garbage paddle so that I can have some fun here, you know? But they're good. They're really good. They're fun to play with. The only issue is 275 big ones. Yep, it's expensive, but there's a couple things I can say to that. First and foremost, when you buy a Gearbox paddle, you're getting a really high quality product. Again, like I've said, I've never run into a quality control issue with these paddles. The second thing is that one of the big gripes with the previous versions of Gearbox with the CX14 and other paddles is that there's just not a lot of reactivity off the face. There's not a lot of oomph, a lot of power. That issue is pretty much completely gone. That's the biggest difference between these paddles and the old ones. So if you've been holding off for a while, you don't want to get a CX14 because of that. The CX14s were $250. These are $275. An extra $25 may be what convinces you. I'm not sure. That's up to you. So if you're one of those guys who, you know, you've been kind of putting it off for a while, I think you're going to be more comfortable getting these paddles now if the power issue with the old CX14s was the thing that really held you back. Now, if you're coming from a really cheap paddle, some crummy thing on Amazon that costs like $10 or whatever, you're going to notice an enormous difference. There's really not much of a comparison, and you can pretty much go with any of these and you'll be fine. If you already have a CX14, this is a tough one. It's really hard for me to make a recommendation if you already have a CX14. If power is a serious issue for you right now, it may be worth upgrading and buying a new one. If your paddle is really old, yeah, you're pretty much good to go. But if you just bought a CX14 2 months ago and you're like, what do I do now? Assuming you can't like exchange it or something like that, I don't know, guys. That's tough. I'm trying to be pretty conservative here with this. That's tough for me to recommend. I want to say yes. I mean, if you can just get the paddle, you're going to notice a difference for sure. But in terms of whether you should upgrade, that's a tough one for me to say. Have I switched? Yep. Yes, I have switched from the CX14 Ultimate to the Gearbox Pro Power Fusion, whatever. It's this one. It's the gold one with a traditional shape. I need the maneuverability at the net, so I want the 16-inch length. That's where, you know, I'm at the net all the time in the games that I play. So yes, I am switching. The paddle is amazing. It's really, really good. It can be difficult recommending upgrades or recommending people to buy the paddle when it costs this much. You know, keep in mind, guys, I get these paddles for free. I get free paddles all the time. I haven't bought a paddle in like 3 years, okay? So it's, you know, I don't feel the pain of having to shell out 275 biggins, right? So just keep that in mind. But if it's time for you to buy a new paddle and you've been hankering for something new, something fun, this is it. As long as you can get used to the noise issue, this is probably going to be a really good one for you. The paddle is seriously, seriously good. Do keep in mind though, if you're coming from another brand that's non-Gearbox, when you switch to a Gearbox with the SST core stuff, these style paddles here, not the GBX, okay? It's going to take you some time to get used to it. It's different. So just keep that in mind. I hope that was helpful. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. I would love to hear what your experience has been so far. Thank you guys so much for joining me, and as usual, I'll see you next time.